Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your attendance today. And as mentioned there, my name is Adam Leto. I'm the Director of the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, and this session this afternoon will look at and explore some of the issues and projects that some of our community initiatives are working on that are sort of built around sort of at-risk and marginalised youth in Western Sydney. At the same time, they're helping build the region's capacity and inspiring, hopefully, our next generation of leaders. We are running a little bit behind time today, so there's a couple of things just to flag. One, we'll probably aim to reduce this session to about 25 minutes, 20-25. We've also had Michael Dagostino step in at the last minute, so thanks, Michael, for your time today. It was previously Lizanne McGregor, but obviously Michael's very well versed in what's happening in Western Sydney, especially in arts. So that'll lead me to introducing some of the guys here up on the stage today. Firstly, we've got Kath Keenan here from Sydney Story Factory, Mayor Chagai from Savannah Pride, Michael Dagostino, as mentioned, from Campbelltown Arts, and Blake Tatafu from the Aboriginal Centre for Excellence. I'm going to briefly give the guys some time to talk through their initiatives. But before I do that, I might start with Mayor, and I think we've got a brief clip just to provide a bit of context to what Savannah Pride is about. So I'll run that over now and get that started.
Do you guys know the courts you're going to? Court 8 and 9. Savannah on 3. 1, 2, 3. Savannah, let's go.
He is their coach, capital C, and what he asks and what he imagines, that's what happens with those kids.
You got Deng. Yeah.
Mayor is a visionary because he's not just building basketballers, he's building people. Some I know have been on the wrong side of the law and have now turned around. Mayor wanted to create a generation of basketball players, but he also was very strong and very focused on the issue of providing some guidance to the young men. And we were able to set up some homework clubs.
If they want to play basketball, they have to do the homework classes. There was no way around it. We were the coaches and at the same time the tutors and at the same time the mentors, the taxi drivers, everything. All voluntary.
When I look at those kids, I see myself. Some of them don't have their mothers or fathers. They feel loneliness. They feel lost. What turned my life around was the sport.
Take your time, timing. You have good pass, good catch.
All these kids, they have the difficulties of settling into Australia.
Ball up high.
So it needs a lot of support, a lot of care.
Good job.
And the sport, which was the key for me at the time.
That's okay. Next time.
What we saw in a fairly short period of time was 150, 200 young Sudanese boys not walking and roaming the streets of Blacktown, but actively engaged in an environment regularly.
Fascinating stuff, Mayor. Congratulations on that program. I'll open it up to the panel now, but maybe if you can talk through each of your respective programs and how, through these initiatives, you're helping drive some of that positive change in Western Sydney. Mayor, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Adam. First, I would like to give thanks to everybody that is here. And just quickly, as Adam mentioned, that we don't have a lot of time. With Savannah Pride, the initiative was starting with ourselves. I was, in my early 20s at that time. So I was 19 and then 20. So we just find it very hard to have something that will give us focus. As we started, we have a lot of young kids that were just around the area, and they are very new. There was a huge new arrival from the old areas of Africa, from Liberia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and all different part of Africa at that time, and then also from Iraq as well. So we just find it very hard to fit in the Australian society as young people. Then the idea was, where should we just put our energy? And as a young adult, I found myself and my colleagues that we can focus on something positive, because Australia was the greatest avenue for us. It's saved. We should only spend our energy in doing the right thing. That's how the initiative of Savannah Pride started, just to engage ourselves, engage many young people as much as we can, and provide them with guidance and support as role models. We just try to be role models to them, and just spend our time in an environment where we are not in danger and not getting lost and run into crimes or any sort of things. And then also just to have an opportunity to go to school, come and play in the sport centers. So that was the initiative of Savannah Pride, and then it just goes into step by step, many kids joining up.
It's interesting you mentioned education, which is probably a nice segue into Kath and the role you're playing through Sydney Story Factory, which established in Redfern 5-6 years ago now, progressing out, based in Parramatta now. How are the programs you're working influencing young people, and what are talk us through some of the work you're doing in that space?
Yeah. Look, I think what we're aiming to do is quite similar. We're helping, we want young people to engage with their education, we want to build their aspiration, and we do all that through running free creative writing programs. Because there's a wonderful thing that happens when you help young people discover their voice and give them a feeling that that voice is heard and that what they have to say is important. So we work with high school kids, we work with primary school kids, we work at all those suburbs that Peter Shergold was just talking about, with unfortunately are in the lower end of the FOEI, the CFA index. And where mostly our programs are run in schools, and we run them with teachers. And we have lots of volunteers who come in with us to support the kids as they write. And they write these beautiful stories, we publish them, we put beautiful covers on them, we celebrate them, we share them with the world, because we want these young people, we want to hear from them, we want to know what they think, and we want them to feel that what they have to say is hugely important to our society.
Thanks, Kate. And Michael, I mean, speaking of voices, I mean, I think arts is probably one of those areas that's maybe a bit overlooked sometimes in favour of other areas, but there's a large concentration of facilities and programs that are happening all across Western Sydney. You're at the head of Campbelltown. Yeah. Well, talk us through some of the work that's happening in that area.
Yeah, I guess we see ourselves as more of a vessel. So all the programs that we've been talking about today, housed at Campbelltown Arts Centre. And so we start with the local. So it's really important for us to start with either local issues, local identity, and local opportunities. But we need to ensure that they have a national and international resonance. So when we're talking about these local things, that they're really understood within a global context. One project that that kind of resonates with us was an exhibition that we curated in 2016, which is around the Yapan massacre. So Governor Macquarie sanctioned 3 battalions to head west and either capture or kill the Aboriginal communities. That happened in 1816. So we put together an exhibition which commemorated this really important event that happened, on Dharawal land, which we're located on. So to give voice to the local Aboriginal community, not to give voice, we actually stepped out of the process. So we appointed an Aboriginal curator who led the process with the local Aboriginal community. And so, for us, it was about giving voice. Oh, I've said that again, but it's not even giving voice, but, we needed to step back for this to happen in the most appropriate way. So it was around cultural preservation. It was around the idea that there's these hidden histories that happened, 15 kilometres away from the Arts Centre, which 90% of our local community did not know. So, having the ability to work on a project like that, is kind of, a foundation stone for Campbelltown Arts Centre.
And Blake, I mean, we've heard today about the role of, or the growth in Indigenous communities, particularly in Western Sydney. the majority of which are under the age of 24, which is interesting. But how can we harness the talent that exists in the region? And what are the challenges? Some of the challenges that need to be overcome. I know obviously your Centre for Excellence is a first step. Do you want to talk us through what's happening with that project and how you can sort of see your role in helping address some of those challenges?
Sure. I guess one of the recurring themes that I'm hearing, and I think we all hear, is that we want to see young people have a voice, and we want to see them, take part in decisions that affect them and things that motivate them and that are meaningful to them. I sit on this panel with the experience of doing youth programs, but I'm currently one of the youth working with the Aboriginal Centre for Excellence. So what this is that I'm currently working alongside 10 other Aboriginal people from Western Sydney, young people, and we work in partnership with mutual respect and mutual power with New South Wales Aboriginal Affairs and Coxon or Ridgeway. And so basically what we're doing is we're steering the direction of what this Aboriginal Centre for Excellence will look like. We as young people determine that young people, we're the experts of our own experiences, and we all come from Western Sydney, we've grown up Aboriginal in Western Sydney, and we want to be able to create this, I guess, centre which will be a legacy that can enhance pride, that will completely ignite motivation in young people with careers, with skill-based training, with education, but more importantly with culture at the epicentre and at the forefront. And I guess when we work with our young people, in particular Aboriginal young people in Western Sydney, we have to contextualise a lot of the ways that we work with our young people, and it could be, instead of having a table sit down to gather ideas, we may all sit on the ground and have a yarn over some food and really, really filter that down to the way that we know home to be and our family lives to be. Because one thing at the back of our minds and our young kids' minds is that we have a responsibility to ourselves, our families and our country and our community that we're on. We're in a really great space at the moment. We are talking about ideas of partnering with different services and programs in Western Sydney. We're still conducting focus groups, which we all lead, us young people lead, with members of our community, Aboriginal or not, because everyone can provide something fantastic. And another scope to this centre would be not just enhancing the lives of young Aboriginal people, but sharing knowledge and information to other Aboriginal people, but broader Australia. And it's something that, I'm pretty excited about.
I can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, education, you mentioned that it's been a central theme throughout the day. And we've heard at different levels this morning its role in the region in helping Western Sydney meet its economic and social objectives. Despite the talent and the opportunities that it can provide, there are still large pockets of disadvantage throughout the region. How is the work that you're doing, whether it's through creative writing, whether it's through sport, arts, Indigenous programs, how is it helping address this, and what sort of support do you think you guys need to address that imbalance around advantage? Kath, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Look, we work with some totally fantastic teachers. We work with amazing teachers all the time, but teachers have so much on their plate, so many things to be contending with, so children coming in with so many other issues that they are facing in their lives that teachers often end up having to deal with. So we see a lot of our role as helping teachers. Our staff are really fantastic creative writing teachers because that's all they do. They are experts at it. They're all writers. So they can come in and they can help work with teachers to support them to do that with their students. What we find, I suppose, is that there are so many things that have to happen before a child is ready to learn. If a child hasn't had breakfast, if a child has witnessed violence in the home before they've come to school, there's a great limit on what a teacher can do when they're contending with all those things. So I think there are so many people who are offering fantastic programs and things, and I think a lot of it is us trying to work together better, to support the kids, to work better with each other, to kind of make sure that we're not duplicating, to make sure that we are doing what it is that will make a difference, and working with the people who are right there with the kids, working with the parents, working with the communities. And, I think really great things are happening, but it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people.
I mean, obviously, your program's centred around sport, but you mentioned education is pivotal towards any sort of progress within it.
Yeah, well, in our perspective, it's not just about sport. Sport is a secondary to us. The primary focus was mainly to give those young people a sense of identity and a pride and motivation that when they go to school, how do they see themselves? How do they see learning and the opportunity to study, and then after study, because there's a lot of things that coming from migrant point of view, there's a lot of challenges where kids leave home, they be in the class, they will always be thinking about what they don't have in their life. Maybe a mother migrated to Australia without a father at home, or a child came with an auntie that both parents are not there. So they have a lot of down, very low self-esteem. But to realize they're confident is when they see their identity and they have a sense of belonging within the class. So when they go out and come to school tomorrow, what they should find out, why do they need to study? Why do they come to school? What do they need to learn? So for us, and this is where we start our first generation, was to tell them the most important thing is to stay listening to your teachers, be respectful. You need to recognize the importance of education. And education, it would be the source of your life, regardless of your mother not being at home to help you to do your homework. What teachers would provide and all the system of education at the school doesn't really mean anything to the kids that don't see a sense of belonging in the school, because the language, the culture, and then also the color as well, they will see themselves completely, totally different. So that's where we put the focus of school as the primary option. What will keep them stay motivated at school? So we center the sport as a leverage to get out there, and then they will look so proud, they'll be happy. So when they go back to school tomorrow, they will be listening, and they look at all their colleagues that goes out and play sport with them as their classmates and teammates at the same time. Then now they will see the coaches as second teachers. So we became the second teachers to them. So we're teaching them all sort of steps that they need to take and relate to the sport. Because the sport now gives the discipline. And as you all know, from experience myself, there's a difference how the kid listen in the class, and how they listen when you put them on the baseline, when you're talking to them on the sideline in the sport field.
Yep.
So if you wanted to marry those things together, and if it works, then the kid will be very successful in life. But completely, they see education very, very hard because it's boring. They don't realize what sort of potential they have. How would they know what they're going to be career-wise in terms of education? So education, that's why the homework program was the key for us. Because we use, if you don't study, like my colleague that was mentioning, is Emmanuel, is there, we divided ourselves. I'm a disciplinary person, that if you don't do your homework, you will not play a game, but you can only practice. Then we use sport to just keep them in check and keep them in focus. And then also the parents can come and tell us, because what the teachers tell the kids at school, they will just throw it away, and then they can just come and say there was nothing happening, or I've been bullied at school. Then now with all different cultures that we are interacting with, where Savannah Pride become more inclusive, is to bridge that gap of cultural fear and identity, then they'll become all common Australians.
Yeah. Is art having a similar impact, Michael, do you find?
Yeah, so we run a supported studio called Little Orange for artists that have an intellectual disability on Thursdays and Fridays. We've been running for about 3 years now. And the idea of confidence in art, I say there's a basic rule of art, you can't get it wrong. Like, you just cannot get it wrong. The more wrong that you get it, the better it is, and the more excited people get around it. And so with that, taking that as a kind of fundamental rule, there's a level of experimentation, and then there comes a confidence out of that experimentation. So within this supported studio, we had artists that it's a competitive studio, so you need to apply to get in. There's rules about attendance, so we treat it like fundamentally any artist studios. So what we've seen over the last couple of years is these artists mature into practicing artists that have had exhibitions, and fundamentally they've changed their personality, their whole personality's changed, where we've had parents come to us and said, our child didn't speak to anybody that they didn't know. Now they speak to, their level of interaction's increased. One artist that spoke to us said she was quite depressed, suicidal thoughts, but because of this studio, it actually changed her outlook on life. So, the power of art and the power of, the confidence that art making can bring, is, I guess, a very fundamental thing of Little Orange. And that could be applied right across the board. I see that happen. For example, we do a lot of work at Reby, Juvenile Justice. It was, on one of the slides.
Mm-hmm.
So we go into Reby, we take artists in there, and you see the kids change. Like, I've been in a few times, and you see these kids over a 6-week period, change to be fairly disengaged and not wanting to participate to actually performing at the end. And so, art is a very, very powerful tool for change, powerful tool to build confidence, and a powerful tool to really build self-esteem in people.
You're right. I might throw the last question, and one for all of you, but some of the key words that have come out today, things like community, belonging, confidence, I see that consistently applied through all of your programs. Blake, what are you seeing at your level about those outcomes? Are they manifesting in any way? Are you working towards that? Where are you on that scale towards reaching that sense of belonging through what you're doing?
Oh, well, I feel like the work that we're doing all together as part of our advisory committee will hopefully, our energy of belonging to where we come from and who we are and our relationships is actually being put into the work that we're doing. And we don't have the centre up and running yet, but one of the main ideas and feelings and energies and vibes, which are things that we workshop through, is that we want our young Aboriginal people to come in and feel safe. And that's just baseline. Feel safe, feel like you can come in, have a cuppa, have a yarn with someone, and not feel a bit frightened and not feel like it's an institution or somewhere where you're going to get quickly judged or zapped up for questions. And I guess the way that we do that is we work with our young people using interpersonal relationships. We come from a strengths-based background in our work. We see what our young people are good at, what they like, and we use that as a launch pad to build their own self-determination. I mean, we can't push our young people along to achieve excellence. We can only help them discover it within themselves and give them the tools that they need to do it themselves.
Michael?
Yeah, look, again, I think, art's a very powerful thing, and in a way that it brings a community together. We see at Campbelltown Arts Centre as we are a part of our local community. We see ourselves as integral. And I take, what Blake's saying about the idea of an institution. Galleries are very scary places, and that's why we've chosen a model that if we're not relevant and we're not a part of our community, we'll become obsolete. Like, we will become a place which, will become a part of history.
And Mayo, how are you creating that sense of belonging?
Well, the sense of belonging is, when young people become part of the community and the entire community really feel proud of one young person that is successful in the surrounding area, then it makes everybody stand up. An example was an outcome of Savannah Pride when some of our young kids, where one or two of them get out to the Australian Centre of Excellence in Canberra at AIS Institute and were selected to represent Australia in the World FIBA Championship. That was a success. And one of the kids, they went out playing with all the other Australians and made Australia proud. That, I think, it would make the entire community feel so proud of one another and take away the differences of how people are judged and attract more connection. And also, in terms of education and how that helped, for example, we had some successful pathway that are created by building confidence in young people and also take away the differences in how community perceive each other from the differences of, like ethnic background or where they come from. Newington College, for example, has got some of our young people that were given a scholarship in terms of sport, but also for social justice, connection in the community, and where those young people stay in Newington and they study there, very high profile school, very prestigious, and then they represent that community at Stanmore area. They made the entire community there so proud of them, and that's part of reflection to how people would see the Western Sydney area, especially areas of Blacktown, a kid that's coming out there from maybe being seen as very disadvantaged background to go to a wealthy school, being in the class with wealthy kids, then that's bridge the gap and make the entire community so connected and not frightened of each other. And also transition. You probably heard that Savannah Pride had some kid that has made it to the American colleges and high school on scholarship. So we were building, the grant-based steps and pathways from Australia and then to international level, where most of them now are in universities, in high school, in junior colleges, but they represent themselves as families and they represent Australia. And now they could play in the Olympic, they could come here and play in the National League. So it goes both ways. Yeah. It's a sense of community pride. So, no one judging one another. So that's how I see it from our development perspective. And that's what inspired so many young kids now that are traveling all across Western Sydney, from Campbelltown all the way to Blue Mountain area. And even at Wollongong, we get kids coming out here, but we don't know how they connect to each other, but they know each other from school, from sport areas, and then they all come together. So now there's a huge mix.
Indeed. Speaking of pride, Kath, I'll finish up with you. Tell us one thing that you're most proud of from Sydney Story Factory.
Gosh. Okay, we did a workshop a while ago where we had these kids come in and we do a program called Robot Birds where the kids create it's half bird, half robot, and they write a poem about it. And at the end of all our programs, the kids read them out. Everyone claps and cheers. In the longer programs, we invite in family, community. And the kids did this and they loved it. And the teacher filmed it on her iPhone. And then when they were back at school, I think the week after at the school assembly, she played this video to the whole school. And one of the girls who'd been there started crying. And the teacher was like, oh, crap. And she said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I should have asked your permission and I apologise. And the girl said, no, I'm not upset because of that. It's just that I did not think that I could do that. And I think that is what we are all doing. We are trying to show young people what they can do, whether it is through art or through baseball or through basketball or through culture or whatever it is. It's showing young people the brilliant things they are capable of.
Yeah. Certainly a lot of talent in Western Sydney, and you guys are at the forefront of making it sort of manifest in a whole bunch of ways. So congratulations to you all. We've got another session coming up. So yes, round of applause. Led by Professor James Arvanitakis, who's got another session that I suppose will build on some of these issues that we heard about. Thank you.
Please welcome your moderator, the babyface Professor James Arvanitakis.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello. That's better. Please don't treat me like my first-year students treat me. They tend to sort of start playing on their phones before I start speaking. Look, thanks very much for coming along to this wonderful panel with three pretty amazing individuals. As a way of introduction, I will say that. I thought that Lachlan Macquarie lecture by Peter Shergold was fantastic, and I think he definitely outlined a really interesting, very complex area that Western Sydney is. And as someone who is actually based at Western Sydney University, I will confess this. I'm actually an eastern suburbs boy, and not that long ago, one of my students walked up to me and said to me, I was at the Penrith campus. He walked up to me and said to me, "Hey James, is it two things I want to ask you?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, and sorry about this, Mark. He goes, "The first thing is, are you really a Rooster supporter?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I was born in the eastern suburbs. That makes 6 of us, so we're all Rooster supporters." And then he said, "Because you really live out east?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why would you want to live there?" And so it was this really great usurping of the vision of people wanting to move from the west to the east. So I thought that was, and I think the way that Peter captured that was fantastic. So we got this really great panel. We got Mark, Amna, and Deng. I won't go through their bios because we've got very limited time, but I will just go straight into questions. And I'm more than happy to take questions from the floor. So I might ask, and I might start with you if possible. So at graduation at Western Sydney, I sit on stage and I watch this amazing multicultural group of people walking across the stage, future leaders of our country. And often, if there's visiting guests, they look at us and they say, "Oh, I didn't realise you had so many international students." And I say, "Actually, they're not international; they're domestic students. Only about 15% of our students are internationals." So it's really interesting to hear other people from other universities say that. And one of the things that Peter Shergold says is, you're looking at the contemporary and future face of Australia, not just Western Sydney. I mean, I suppose I want to draw out what you think of that statement. Is Western Sydney the future face of Australia?
Oh, I love out there because every year we make grand statements, and it speaks to the aspiration that we all have. When I think about some of the things the earlier panel members said in the session before, I think that some of those things resonate for me, about not really believing what we're capable of and what is possible. And we can't underestimate how powerful those voices, like my colleagues sitting on this panel, how powerful our voices are and how powerful our contribution, like how significant that contribution is in their lives. And I love that you said contemporary and future faces, because I think that's exactly what it is. It's both.
Fantastic. Deng, over to you, if you don't want to.
Well, I don't think I'll be able to add anything to that. Quite correct. Yeah. So maybe next question. Okay.
Great. Okay. This is going to get tougher as we go on. Mark, I might actually pass to you. I mean, I suppose you sit, you have this really unique perspective watching the changing face of Penrith, where you were such a star figure there for a while, but now, you have a very different role. How have you seen the outer rim of Sydney, specifically if we look at the sort of peri-urban area of Western Sydney, change, and is this a hopeful change for you?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I think it's exploded with vitality. The best thing my parents done for me was move to Mount Druitt when I was 18 months old, and with a third house in the street of a housing commission street, and I lived there for 20 years in Wayland, and I drive past my old house once every month with my 5 kids to show them exactly where I came from and who I am, because I don't think we should ever forget where we come from or who we are. And now I live in Penrith and have for I turned 50 before Christmas, so I've been in Penrith for 25 years as well, played with the club, and I just see so much multicultural vitality growing. It's everywhere you look. It's so much friendship, so much business opportunity, so many sporting heroes starting to grow from all walks of life. And I think that's basically the catalyst of what young men and women are trying to strive to achieve. They're trying to become their own identity, and Penrith is definitely the place to become that.
Fantastic. So one of the themes that I suppose we're trying to get into this panel as well is love and hate. So I did some work with the Act Now, which is a youth body funded by the New South Wales government, and we got about 5,000 responses to the question, what do you love about Western Sydney? And those words, community, heroes, opportunities, environment, all came out. But obviously there's recently we've also seen issues around the people raising concerns. Part of them has been regarding the marriage equality. Others, always the idea of radicalisation. So maybe move on to that. Are there things to be concerned about, and what can we do about them? Deng, I might ask you that one.
Okay, thank you. I think my short answer would be the Western Sydney is quite misunderstood in a lot of ways. We are a good community, big community, and the fingers that normally point at our direction, they don't even reside in Western Sydney. They don't even know how we go about our life. So these are outsiders, in my views, and therefore everyone from Western Sydney or Greater Western Sydney should just ignore those people and let's move on with our job, what we do best. And I think what we do best is to embrace everyone equally. And in my case, I can say that I was Sudanese back in the days. I was involved in a war with a person that may be looking like her, a Muslim in general, and I would have hit her to death, pretty much dreaming of strangling her at night. But when I came to Western Sydney, especially being educated here, and see multiculturalism in practice, and being able to learn Australian way, I have seen no such barrier in being able to actually work with Muslim, being able to even go to mosque myself and practice whatever they pray. Do the same thing in terms of Christianity. I neither don't go to church, but I pray equally the same way. I think it's a matter of respecting others. And of course, you know very well from Western Sydney University, when I graduated, and of course I promised to start up my brother's foundation, the first recipient of John Mike Foundation were actually Muslim. Just imagine that. I work hard for it. And to make sure that Western Sydney should not be a place where politics should be played, politics of hate. It should be politics of love. And we all should practice that every day of our life, and I'll continue to practice that. And I have done it this year again. There's another Muslim boy that got a scholarship. It is to show that even though I have suffered injuries in Sudan, my baggage are behind, I left them behind. And I'm here only working for the interest of Australian, an interest of Greater Western Sydney, and I have no any other agenda. So those who have agenda to break us, to split us, to divide us, well, they have no room in Western Sydney because we're growing stronger. And I know most of us, we join in and help the new migrant settle properly by supporting them financially and support them morally. And that's what actually will bring us together and help one another. It's a practical approach. We don't need to talk politics. And it is all in our hands. That's what I said. So you can't just leave it to the government to do it. It's your job, it's my job. And we all should play that active role than try to blame somebody else. I don't play blame games. I don't do that. I don't play a racial card. I don't do that. And of course, I stand by my words because Western Sydney is a greater place than any other place in the whole country. And we will grow.
Fantastic. I think that is a... I think just picking up from one of the points that Deng made, and I think is a really powerful point, is community is not just a one thing that happens just magically. It's something that we work towards, you know. We have to work towards through our actions. And before we heard about the arts and the way that we can use writing. And I might go again to you. I mean, one of the people behind the Western Sydney Giants women and working on that. And Mark, I'll also ask you as well. I mean, how important is sport in making sure that we continue to drive towards that, continue to drive towards some of the really amazing things that we want as a community that are highlighted by Deng?
I found sport to be the thing that helped me really connect all of those things where I didn't feel sidelined or silenced. It was the space that I could express myself. And it was the space that, for me, when I started, it was about identity politics, you know, picking up on what Deng said, where everyone had something to say about Western Sydney and who I was because I was Muslim and a woman and Arab heritage. And so everyone had something to say about my non-Australianness, and it was the place that I could reclaim that identity and say, well, this is the intersection of all the things that make me me, and I'm proud of those things. And it was a space that we could actually say, welcome to Western Sydney, come play footy, because we were the first Western Sydney side. And so since then, I have a love of Penrith as well. We have a joint venture with Penrith, and that love expanded from representing my community in Auburn really well to going, actually, I'm part of a broader region. And I'm really proud of the work that we do. And I love that we have become some of many faces that are heroes, that are the faces that people recognise and say, hey, I saw you on that campaign or on a news clip and I really like what you do. And it makes me feel good about where I'm from. You know, I don't want anyone to ever be ashamed of being born in Auburn Hospital or... Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm sure there were people that were ashamed once upon a time because of how the story is told about who we are and where we live. So for me, it was like, well, how do I change that story so that we go from this nice conversation about diversity and multiculturalism to addressing some of those real issues, like that shame that some of us inherit or the lack of opportunity to actually create the opportunity? How do we make it happen so that we can excel and do what we do with excellence?
Well said, yeah. I think with sport, it doesn't discriminate. Everyone can play sport from any background. And I went to the Blacktown PCYC when I was 10 to learn how to stick up for myself because I was getting picked on by older blokes. And I got taught how to box at PCYC and I didn't get picked on anymore. Plus I grew about 6 inches taller. But sport is an escape. I coached my sons in sport when I was young and I could see there were some sad stories behind some of the kids I coached from different backgrounds, and they'd come to training and all their problems from home would disappear once they had a ball in their hands. And I think with sport and kids who go home to families that aren't quite functioning the way that other kids' families are, you know, some of my son's teammates would see our household and how much in harmony it was, and then they go to little Tommy's house and his dad was a drunk and his mum was a bad gambler, and I had Tommy over my house more times than he stayed at his house, and I thought, how can you try and change learned behaviour, which Tommy's growing up to see? And the saying of monkey see, monkey do is so prevalent because it is. We don't realise as parents how much our kids watch us, both good and bad habits. So I had a quiet word to Tommy's dad and said, you know that Tommy's watching everything you do. And he doesn't want to go, he wants training to go 2 hours longer because he doesn't want to go home to see you and your wife in that state. And I encourage any type of sport, any type of physical activity, healthy body, healthy mind. I still practice that now at 50 years of age, and I train harder now than I did when I was 30 because I know that if I train harder, I'm going to get a lot more done in my life and I'm going to feel a lot better. And It breaks my heart to see young kids not given the opportunity because they can't afford registration. I think it's something the government have to have a real good look at, having kids, some subsidies for kids who can't afford registrations, because every kid wants to play sport. Every kid wants to have a go at sport. And the fact that we're denying some kids that right is a damn shame.
Yeah, and look, and I think, looking at the work that the three of you do, I think, and why I'm really privileged to be on this panel is, it's not just about the high level stuff that the three are very good talking about, but it's some of the real practicalities of the everyday impacts we can have on people's lives. And I think that real pragmatic stuff, like you said, Mark, and Deng, you said that was really powerful. I've got a couple more questions, but does anyone want to ask questions from the audience? I'm aware that you guys have been sitting there for quite a while, so, anyone before I zoom in? Yeah, sure. Okay, so what inspired each of you to get to where you are today? I might start with you before going to Mark and then Deng.
I was having a conversation with a friend who's /researcher, and she's looking at mental health and the importance of mental health and what are some of the issues around mental health that young people are struggling with under the age of 25, 13 to 25. And in that conversation, when I was talking to her about what motivates me every day and why I do what I do, she said to me, it was so simple, right? She was like, so basically you're trying to be the person in your life that you never had. And I was like, aha, that makes so much sense. I think when you grow up with, for me, it was trauma and seeing there was a lot of struggle. My parents had 5 kids in 5 years. They couldn't afford much. They definitely couldn't afford to put us in organised sport, couldn't afford to send us to tutoring. They literally earn money to pay the mortgage and keep that roof over our head and food in our mouths. When you grow up seeing the struggle and being the eldest, I saw what was happening. They didn't need to say anything. They didn't need to be the kind of couple that argued. I was aware. You kind of develop empathy, compassion. I didn't want to see my dad slip a disc before he couldn't work anymore as a labourer, but that's what happened to him. And so for me, I spent my whole life thinking about, what can I do to help? What can I do to help my parents? And then when I saw my friends, I saw that they had similar circumstances. Yeah, there were things that varied, but I saw people struggling to live right and struggling to get better. And so for me, I think that's probably the one simple thing. I just try and do that little bit extra, recognising that I didn't really have that many people do that for me, but I can create that impact in someone else's life.
Mark?
Postcode racism was why I wanted to be where I am today. It's why I still live in Penrith. And when I was 14 or 15, I was going for an apprenticeship with a company in Sydney. Many apprenticeships, actually, while still living in Mount Druitt. My postcode was 2770. You would have recently seen the series on Struggle Street. That was kind of just around the next suburb from me, which I was pretty irate at because it doesn't depict who we are. And every single suburb in Sydney has poor people like that who are struggling, and SBS took advantage of that, I feel. And that's not right. And it's kind of it's why I could live anywhere in Sydney if I wanted to, but it's why I love Penrith. It's why I stay in Penrith, to keep my kids grounded, to know that, back to the apprenticeship story, I wrote to about 3 or 4 different companies, and my nan said to me, who lived at Burwood, she said, try changing your postcode at the end of it. I said, what's that going to do, Nan? It's just a postcode. She said, just try it. And I did. I put her postcode of Burwood in it, which I can't remember what it was, but I got a reply straight away saying, can you come in for an interview? So straight away, at age 15, I realised that there was discrimination of where I lived in Mount Druitt, and I didn't hit me like a ton of bricks, really. And I from that day on, my school motto, which I never really realised at primary school, was strive to achieve. From that day forward, I said to myself, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to strive to achieve as much as I can. And And shout from the top of the hills that Mount Druitt and the Western Sydney is just as affable as anywhere else in the world. In fact, there's more love in Western Sydney than anywhere else that I've ever been. People just don't know it. People who live there do. People who live there stay there. But people who don't, people who cast aspersions on somewhere they've never been, cast aspersions on someone they've never met, really makes me angry. And I continue that role on radio today. Every chance I get is to speak up Western Sydney. And I'll keep doing it as long as I live.
Fantastic. Yeah. Deng?
Similar to Mark, actually. Look, I got a little daughter now, and her mother, she's from Hornsby. She lives in Hornsby. And we are actually debating now where our daughter should be brought up. She hates Blacktown. I love Blacktown. So we have differences there. Even though she was born in South Africa, she still hates Blacktown. So these are some of the things that we have to take it on our chin. That you just don't desert the town because some people perceive it to be. That is a perception. What drives me is basically, I think, kind of a sense of guilt and sense of being alive instead of being dead. So I thought, because of my path, I can pay back my bad part, my crimes, and also to be able to, because I don't believe in religion, I don't believe in heaven and hell, so I try to clean my sins so that I'll be a good man when I'm dead. God is going to give me something else in return. And so those are things that I believe in, and of course I was given opportunity. My brother smuggled me out, took risks. Christine Harrison brought me here, Australian woman, my Australian mom. And so was Bob, and so is Jeff Aitchison, and so is Western Sydney University and greater people of Australia to get me out of that hell called refugee and hell called war. So I am not a man that's going to claim anything that I did by myself. I was given opportunity, so I have to work hard to make sure that I will never be naked again like I used to, or be barefoot, or be hungry. I know how it feels like to be a refugee or to be poor, and I know in a Western Sydney, we still somehow, based on the description that I got, we basically are seen as a refugee camp. That's how they view us. If you segregate one of your own and say this party is bad and that party is good, what are you doing to the country? You're dividing the country. So fix it. Western Sydney is not a refugee camp. It's for hardworking people. And for me, just like Mark, I will work till I drop dead, and I will work for other people because I think that is the best way to clean your sins. If you believe you're not a sinner, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We all do commit sins, but it's the idea of giving somebody a fair go. Fair go is Australian way, it's unique. If you don't practice it, get out of Australia. You don't belong here. And I'm serious. Give other people a fair go. I have no resume in my work. I don't select people that come to me to get a job based on their credential or how many years they've been doing. No, I give them a fair go. Let them try. And if they fail, support them until they get there. You just don't refuse people because they don't have the skill. Give them a skill. It's called platform. And that is where I'm sitting because somebody gave me that opportunity. Otherwise, there will be no progress. So give people a chance. That's what it is. let them make a mistake. I believe that mistake was what was discussed before earlier by Catherine. People learn by making a mistake. Let them make a mistake, but don't discriminate them. So resume is itself is a document that discriminates other people from getting a job, even though they will be able to work hard, because I know each of the people that work for me, they have shown to be loyal to me, have shown to be hardworking people. So give Western Sydney a chance, give them a fair go, and we can actually achieve something.
So, I'm actually getting the wind up, so unfortunately that brings us to an end to this wonderful panel. If I may draw on my philosophical Greek heritage and quote the Stoics. The Stoics were from Greek tradition, and they talked about how you should live your life and say goodbye to people like every day is your last, not in anticipation that you will, that you should be hedonistic, but about how you want to be remembered, about the way you want to leave relationships behind. And I think, the two things I think we got from this panel for me, a lot of things, but I think two of the things is that we make a community by our actions, and it's not a one size, it's not just a one thing that happens. We must continue to make it happen. And the second thing is about that community takes shape by the amount we give back to it. And I think Amna, Deng and Mark are fantastic examples about how we can do that, and that's how we confront and celebrate both the really amazing things, the love, and also manage to confront the dark side of all societies, which is the hate. So please join me in thanking them for a wonderful panel.